How you doing, Frank?
Pretty well. How are you folks?
Doing well. Doing well.
Good. Huh?
Oh my God. Please tell me there's a rabbit in that hat.
There is. He's raising hell with my scalp.
Wow.
Well, I told you I'd have to raid my closet for a vintage hat, you know. Thought I'd go overboard here.
A while back, for reasons I'm not exactly sure about, I decided to see if I could teach myself a couple sleight of hand tricks with playing cards, because there was some pretty good tutorials on YouTube, and so I went down a little bit of a magic rabbit hole for like just 2 seconds, not enough to like really call it a lifestyle change or anything, but sleight of hand card tricks. I gotta say, I got respect for that a little bit. Frank, did you ever mess around with any of that stuff?
Well, when I was a kid, I thought it would be fun, but it came to me in a hurry that my hands are just too small.
It does seem like it takes some hand size to handle those cards. It does. I couldn't believe also like how much practice it took. Because without the practice, the cards just go squirting everywhere. Like this one little thing I was trying to do, like I played more 52 card pickup than I'd like to.
That's right. Yeah, I think, the practice thing is what it's all about. And of course, playing music has nothing to do with that.
Yeah. It's weird. Every once in a while, a left-handed guitar will come in, and I'll actually like left-hand play it and remember those early days of guitar playing where I was like.
Well, for sure, the people who come into the shop, the left-handed people who come into the shop, are 10 times better at playing a right-handed guitar than we are playing a lefty.
Yeah.
Because they don't have any choice just to try it out.
I've known several people that play right-handed guitar left-handed, and they don't change the strings on it. They just have the E6 is on the bottom rather than.
So sort of like the bumblebee, right?
Yeah, and it always sounds pretty interesting.
We had one old friend and customer who was a lefty, and he took the Roberta Benn class and built himself a guitar, and enjoyed it, and played it for about 15 years. And he came in one day and he says, "I want you to turn it to right-handed." He says, "I can't take it any longer." And he just absolutely said that whatever happened, he could never get adjusted. Adjusted to playing left-handed, and he's a lefty.
Yeah.
And after he did conversion from, a few weeks later, he says, "I can't believe I feel better already."
Really?
Yeah.
That's a friend of mine who was a really talented fingerstyle guitar player was a natural left-handed that played right-handed guitar, straight up normal righty. And he always claimed that it didn't affect him. But for fingerstyle, I mean, that's the one place where you really like your dominant hand. I mean, the chording is not nearly as, I think, dexterous, in need of the dexterity as the picking side.
Yeah, perhaps, but with flat picking, couldn't be any more sort of obvious connection between that and the rhythm you play.
Yeah.
So I sent you those links, if that helps.
Yeah, I think we.
Just it's only because we left that hanging.
Yeah, I'll post that stuff in the thing. Do you want to take a look at the links, or do you want to talk about some other stuff? I'd kind of like to get into some guitar repair stuff a little bit more in depth, if that's okay.
I won't have video stuff ready. Oops, excuse me.
I think that's okay.
Video or even photographs handy, but sure.
I was thinking we got a little bit before everybody kind of gets in. Ted, are you recording yet?
Yeah, and also you're a little blurry.
I'm a little blurry. I've been having problems with this.
Out of focus, I guess, is the better question, or the better.
It's been having a hard time. How's that? Is that better?
As long as you don't get too close, yeah.
See my fancy keyboard. I'm doing a late in life learning project of teaching myself how to type.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's come to this.
Yeah, I'm having to try to reteach myself how to type after being a solid typist for years. That's the one bit of coordination I haven't gotten back. That's recent brain thing.
Did you take typing in school?
Oh yeah. My mother was a legal stenographer, and she was certified in the 30s at 100 words a minute corrected on one of those big industrial clanky machines that everybody used for typewriters. She was mighty solid on that. She was extremely clear that my brother and I would learn a number of important skills that would do us good for the rest of our lives. Number one for her was typing and cooking, and cooking was the other one.
Yeah.
And sewing as well. She got into that too for a while. Just that, you guys need to know how to do just some basic stuff to get you by.
It's true. I wish, like, if I could go back and tell my younger self something, it would be just keep adding skills. Like, I wish that like the time that I spent after high school where I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do.
I know about that.
I would have done a survey of jobs with very useful skills. Like, I don't know that I would have ever wanted to build houses for a living, but boy, I imagine those guys that build houses for a living, even if you do it for just 2 or 3 years, you probably know all about houses by the end of it, at least more than I know. And now I own a house and I'm constantly how does a wall work?
Well, at the risk of telling too many stories, we had I met a fellow at one of the Healdsburg guitar festivals, guitar show things, and he built some archtop guitars, and they were just wonderful. Just everything about the fit and finish and everything was absolutely dead on the money. It looked like they came out of college shop. And I said, "Wow, how long have you been doing this?" And he says, "Oh, 4 years." I said, "Come on, man, 4 years. What did you do before that?" He says, "Well, I sprayed gunite in swimming pools." And I'm thinking, this guy's nuts. And so I asked him, "Well, you got to tell me, how does that transfer?" And he says, once you get used to looking at surfaces and curves and ferring lumps and stuff out, so it doesn't matter what the material is, you're getting the eye for it.
Yeah, that eye for that. I think about things that accelerated my guitar career, and definitely it was not fun, but spending time in a finish department in guitar manufacturing was a real acceleration of my ability to look at things. And I'm sure guys that work in cabinet shops probably get the same experience of just that very methodical. I mean, we would inspect guitars like a typewriter, you just like that. But yeah, it's What kind of finishes were you using when you were building guitars? You
Lacquer.
getting you were using lacquer like
Yeah, when Richard and I started building guitars, we just I don't know, we took the path of least resistance, I guess, like everybody would, and so we used normal, regular materials, and at the time, everybody said high glue is the thing for woodwork and stuff like that. So we made every blessed instrument out of liquid high glue. And I got to tell you, today, I have yet to see one with a glue joint separate.
yeah.
There's a top joint or a back joint or fingerboard slipping or anything. People who spend so much time denigrating high glue, I think, are just missing out on something here.
The
On liquid high glue, I mean.
yeah, it takes a real extreme environment, from my understanding, to really attack that stuff. You have to have like super high humidity and super high heat for it to
Yeah.
really take it.
Yeah, and we've had to take the necks out of a couple and various things like that, and they separate normally.
Were you using, was the Franklin's?
It wasn't. It was Franklin's high glue. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, we used to always have a bottle of that around in the shop, and it came in handy for a lot of stuff. Like, it was really good fast stuff for putting a cleat in. If you wanted to put a cleat in, you could just like put some on there, and you know, I think, yeah, I don't know, it'd be interesting. Did you know, like Gibson and Martin were pretty keen to move away from it in their factories.
Well,
I think
yeah.
for pretty obvious reasons, but they both kind of went different directions. So what's that? Do you know anything about that white glue that Martin used, like in the '60s? That
As far as I know, it's regular aliphatic resin, and we're used to seeing it yellow. And I've been told, with sometime in the last 10 years anyway, that the yellow stuff we buy is yellow so it would look different on the shelf in the hardware store, and that it's identical in every way to the quantity stuff that they were getting. In the early days, or way earlier than my time, Martin bought their high glue from a company called Peter Cooper. And Peter Cooper went out of business. And they ended up, quit doing high glue, and they ended up getting aliphatic resin from them. But I believe they sold their high glue operation to what's the name of it? Macmillan.
Milligan and Higgins.
Milligan and Higgins. They remain the only high glue manufacturer in North America.
So
they're not the only people making that kind of gelatin, but only for glue.
So if I went to Milligan and Higgins, and visited, would I see actual hides hanging up and curing? And
well, I don't know. They've been. I've seen different sorts of photographs, and one of them was a photograph of a really large warehouse with bulldozers, shoveling hides around. But I don't know enough about leather tanning, but the guy that I used to talk to years ago said they use mostly what's called chrome splits. And so I assume that we're talking about, stuff that's not used for structural, decorative, or whatever reasons that we're using leather for, the stuff that's basically being thrown out. And their deal is to extract the collagen from it. And
is the collagen, is that the layer between the actual skin and the?
I have to say, I think it was actually just the skin itself, but I really don't know.
Yeah.
And I have to say, my interest never really went down that particular rabbit hole. But I did spend some time, and right around the late '80s, just I made myself a New Year's resolution, which was use more high glue, and I specifically decided I was going to get to be agile and capable and understand the utility and how to work with with hot high glue.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out to be kind of tricky stuff at times. You know,
It is.
Make yourself the mistake of clamping the bridge on before, while the glue is still getting to be in gel state. If you clamp it on before the temperature drops below about 95, you're dead. It'll just pop right off.
That is one nice thing about it though, is I like if you miss it, it lets you know the next day when you try to put strings on it, and you just like pop it off and give it another whirl. So
sorry.
Oh yeah, sometimes I'll do it. Like if I feel like I missed it, I just pull it off right then, clean it up, and give it another. Do you have any kind of elaborate stuff for getting? For a long time when I started out, I was using high glue and trying to get in that rush. I was winding up with bridges kind of slightly not in the right spot when I was done, which is a little bit more. Do you have any tricks for getting the bridge on fast and in the right spot?
Well, for sure. I make a dam with masking tape. Like 5 layers thick of masking tape, at least in half a dozen points, if not all around the whole bridge, so that if I could do it with my eyes closed, plop the bridge down, slide it into place, it drops in, and that's it. And then when it comes to working with the glue itself, I don't use a glue pot because I don't do that much glue work. You know, anybody's building might want to keep a pot going at all times with a brush in it, but you'd have to be gluing a lot, way more than repair guys typically do to do that. And so I worked out my little routine of doing everything in the microwave, and so it's really quick and easy. And so I have little cups of high glue that pre-mixed, if you will, and put in the refrigerator. And when it comes time to use the glue on, say, gluing a bridge, I'll take one of those little cups out, put it in the microwave for a few seconds until it just becomes liquid. Then I'll take a coffee cup and fill it close to the top and just boil it like crazy. So just fully good hard boil, and then I'll just drop my little cup in there. It floats nicely because it's just those little hot sauce cups that you get from the Mexican restaurant, and I'll have that, and I'll race right from there to the bench, having presumably all cleaned up and everything ready to go. I'll take the bridge and throw it into the microwave until it's ripping hot, like way hotter than I want to handle. And I don't handle it much, so it's okay. I can still pick it up with my fingers quickly, and then I slop the glue on, just gob it on with a brush, mash it down, put my calls on, and clamp it up tight. I've still got plenty of time to spare, and maybe extra ooze out, so which is no big deal. And then you follow the simple directions of when you glue up, you wait for it to gel a little bit, and then you can kind of roll it up with your fingers or paper towel, and then wash it off with hot water, and it comes out really, really neat. And I don't miss the bridge location that way. I can't find the same level of rigidity or security with any kind of pins or dummy bridge pins or any of that stuff. It just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Works for the other guy.
I think the trying to index off the bridge pin holes is like, I don't know, especially on old guitars, like the bridge pin holes in general are not, I don't think, reliable enough to index off of in my experience.
Right.
The thing about putting the bridge in the microwave, like I started doing that a couple. I'm glad to hear that you're doing that, because it occurred to me to do that like probably about 4 bridges ago, and I was like, wait a second, I've never heard of anybody else doing this. Is there something wrong with this? So it's nice to.
I've been doing it forever, basically, and it's worked for me. The one area that I don't trust with that are some of these particularly imported guitars that have very highly lacquered bridges.
Yeah.
I just figure we're going to lose the lacquer if we do that.
Yeah.
So I try to heat it, warm it more gently with a hair dryer right there on the spot and all.
Have you done much with high glue and bridges on guitars that are hard to get inside on, like a nylon string guitar? Would you clamp that with like a go bar deck, or do you have a good strategy?
No, I use clamps for everything. I found years ago that it didn't pay me to make a call that fits the I'm going to say reinforcement bridge plate area, like on the classicals, because there's too much variability in spacing of all the little braces and the height of all that stuff. And so I found over the years that it paid me to have clamps that'll reach there that have got big feet on them. And so that gives me plenty of good distribution of clamping pressure, even if there's no bridge plate.
Do you use I see you guys use the one kind of caul over the top of the bridge to rule them all, and then the thumb screws that push down on the wing. Do you use that one, or do you
I use that one. I also use the one that not too often, but I also like the style that Taylor came up with.
Which
they have the large heavy clamps that have a T section and separate screws for 3 positions on top. And I don't know, but I would bet that I have it on the Fret's website. But
yeah, I think I remember that now.
So it's got 3 full-size screws and thumb screws, and I made mine with heavy leather, brass and leather pads. So I couldn't scratch the bridge or anything like that. And I'll tend on the wings of, say, a modern Martin bridge, I want to make sure the clamping pressure is on more to the outside than in the middle, because if anything, they want to cup as they're drying. So you want to hold the edges down. It's kind of like the fingerboard. Somewhere along the way, we learn that it doesn't matter if you put any pressure at all in the middle of the fingerboard. It's all got to be on the edges. And once you get that in your head, you say, "Hey, how come everything worked great now?" So with the bridge call in bottom end of the clamp, if you will, sometimes I'll take my sharp knife and just hollow it out a little bit, so they've got a little bit better distribution at the curly type edges. Same thing with the pyramid bridge. I make a V shape that covers the pyramid, but it's not the same pyramid as the original. It's not as the guitar. It's just, it catches only the outside edges, because the center of the pyramid has no chance of bending by accident, but its little wings can. So I like to be able to clamp it tight with those.
Danny was wondering, the hide glue in the refrigerator, do you have a guess on the shelf life on that?
Till it gets moldy.
Moldy, yeah.
And I can't say for sure. Sometimes they put in, what do you call it? A little bit of preservative type stuff. And I talked to one of the hide glue chemists, and I said, the last batches that we've gotten tend to mold over in a few weeks. And I have a few containers of hide glue that I accidentally kept in the refrigerator for over a year, and they're not moldy. And he says, well, it probably got a little bit of preservative in them. So you can just get any kind of food preservative, mix it in with your hide glue if you want. Won't hurt the glue. Okay, well, that's cool. I never actually had to do that, because we try to mix the hide glue in quantities that fit our use pattern. So I mix enough high glue to go for maybe 3-4 weeks. And it always seems to last that long before it gets moldy. And that's the only thing you can tell instantly because it's food.
Do you feel like, I mean, having used the bottled hide glue, which I'm guessing Franklin's must be roughly 192, right? Like I don't know.
Gram strength, I have no way to know that. In fact, none of that gram strength makes a whole lot of sense until you kind of twist your head around, because one of the earliest things I remember reading about hide glue is that gram strength of hide glue over 350 is too strong for woodworking. That struck me as being insane. How can a glue be too strong? And it's taken me quite a while to figure out, I think, what they mean by that.
Well, I know, when I first heard 192 gram strength, I had assumed that they must have had like done some kind of physics test where they had two blocks together and they tried to break them apart. And
the test is very specific.
But it isn't that. It has something to do with like displacing the glue when it's in the water or something.
They mix up a standardized gel of it, a standardized solution of it. And I don't know quite what that is, but they have a standard water to glue recipe that they use. They mix it up to that, heat it up, and let it gel. And then they test the strength of that gel, and that is the gram strength. So gel strength and gram strength are identical. And I'm starting to get a little hazy on the details, but I think it's the total force needed to push a 10 millimeter diameter 4 millimeters down into the glue. And whatever gram strength that takes.
So does that translate to strength of cured glue actually holding?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Why would they say it's too strong?
Yeah.
And it took me, I think I figured it out, but it took me an embarrassingly long time to kind of guess what that means, because the higher the gram strength of the glue, the more water it takes to get it to be in a usable consistency, i.e. brush it on, squirt it on, put it on, clamp it. And the higher gram strength takes a lot more water, like 3 times as much. And I'm thinking, well, okay. So you put in the water and you glue it up. Okay, now what happens to the water? Well, it evaporates eventually inside the glue joint, leaving maybe a third as much glue actually holding the thing together. And so that's why I think there's that happy balance for glue, the gram strength of glue.
Yeah.
And so I asked the glue chemist, he said that, they make everything from glass chipping on to whatever. And so I asked him, what other gram strengths were used? And he says, well, they use a very low gram strength for chipping glass. Because, and again, he didn't give me definitions why, but I assume it's because of the way the water comes out of it and how much it shrinks when it does. And then he mentioned, that there's gel, and some people use Knox unflavored gelatin for doing their violin work or whatever. Those guys are sort of notorious for wanting the clearest of all possible, and it's as clear as it ever gets. A little stinky though, compared, you wouldn't think, but it is. And so if you use that or ask that kind of stuff, then you get into another weird area. But he said, well, the Knox unflavored gelatin runs around 350.
Really?
Which puts it at the too strong for woodworking by the too much water definition that I've used. it is used and it's perfect, does work very well, but it's maybe doesn't work as well.
Have you ever messed around like so the intelligence report I got on using the 192 that I used, it said,
Sure.
1 to 1.4 glue to water, and I've experimented with pushing that to like 1.1 and then or 1 to 1, and just adding more glue. Of course, it reduces your open time. But boy, I think like more. I think just kind of instinctually, I feel like more low gram strength glue, like mixed at a higher ratio, would be stronger than high gram strength mixed at, watered down in order to get it usable. Because isn't it like the open time really goes down on those high gram strength glues too, doesn't it?
Yeah, because they gel quicker. And is it the lack of water, or is it the gram strength? And since they're measuring the gram strength at a given concentration, I don't know. You got me.
So you did use that
interesting
not
stuff to contemplate, and it can drive you a little bit nuts. As a matter of practicality, I find that the very high gram strength is really interesting for some stuff you didn't think about. Well, what if you can't really clamp it so well? If you use a lot of high gram strength glue, then you can just sort of hold the thing in place while it gels. And so I found a marked increase in speed and convenience of using 512 glue for doing little patches where they're unreachable in any other way. And I found it to be indispensable for the cloth patches. If we don't do a lot of cloth patching anymore, but when we do, mixing that with a lot more water makes everything go so much easier. Everything goes saturated and friendly, and they just sort of slop together, and they stay and really and solidify. And so I'm assuming that the really high gram strength glue with a lot of water is what a bunch of industrial process is.
Would you use that then to, like, if you're replacing a ribbon, like a ribbon side reinforcement on a D18?
Sure.
That would be a good
If you couldn't reach it, you couldn't clamp it, you can't do anything else. Yeah, absolutely. And again, regular high glue is okay for that too, but in either case, liquid high glue fails utterly because it doesn't gel. Because it doesn't gel at all with the drop in temperature.
Cool.
I.e., that's why they call it liquid high glue.
Which, when you were talking to glue chemists, were you talking to the Milligan and Higgins people? Are they approachable? Like if a person called them up, would they have time to talk to you about that?
Well, yeah, I had a circumstance that just sort of thrust me into it, just because of mostly social stuff. But I got a phone call from our old pal Hideo Kawamoto, and he said he's just about run out of glue. And I said, well, what do you mean you're running out of glue? He says, well, my bag's almost empty. I said, a bag? And he said, well, yeah, we buy glue in 50-pound bags. Save a tremendous amount of money that way. I said, okay, sounds good to me. So I started talking to the other guys. I didn't have any 50-pound bags or anything. And so I started talking about with some of the local guys in the Northern California Association of Luthiers, and we did a little chat about high glue and all that stuff. And at the end of it, I said, well, I'd be willing to order a bunch of glue. Who wants in on the big glue deal? And we took a little while trying to find out what kind it is that most people agreed was the right kind. It turned out to be 192, although there was some discussion about 212. I tried both and couldn't tell a difference. Just inconsistency. And so we went ahead and ordered, I think it was 650 pounds of the glue, and split it among the gang. And I got myself I can't remember now. They're either 25-pound sacks or 50-pound sacks. Tossed it up in the attic, and it's up there. It'll be there long after I'm gone. But too bad, you know. It cost almost nothing. It was like the cost of the glue was the same as the shipping,
Uh-huh.
and I think that might have worked out to $1.50 a pound for the glue plus shipping.
I'm super curious to talk to those guys to find out, like,
Give them a call.
who is buying all of this hide glue and for what purposes. It can't be luthiers that are keeping them in business.
Oh no, it's cardboard, man.
Cardboard.
Everything you can think of is put together with high glue.
Isn't that something?
It remains the cheapest glue you can get.
Yeah.
So cardboard, gummed envelopes, stamps, and I was the last time I talked to the guy there, which is now a good number of years. He says, "Let me tell you a little secret that we don't really publicize. High glue is how fresh money seems crispy. It all gets a little coating of high glue."
Yeah. It's a little starch for it, huh?
It's the protein, yeah. So just don't tell your vegan friends.
Oh my goodness.
Your money is contaminated.
Contaminated with beef.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this country, he said, hide glue is made almost exclusively of beef hides. Eatable glue and Kodak film stuff was all pretty much pork, and he said he had no idea why.
Huh.
And then, of course, in Europe, they use anything that'll walk, swim, or crawl.
Yeah. You ever gone off animal with glue? Have you ever messed around with rabbit or fish or any of the other?
Somebody gave me a little bit of sturgeon glue one time.
Sturgeon?
It's the glue is sometimes called isinglass, and it's the absolute domain of like places like the Smithsonian. They have the highest possible order restoration done of certain kinds of things, you know. And all I can say is, I'm sure they know what they're doing and they need it, but it's way beyond my life.
In terms of being able to appreciate it as an adhesive?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can imagine what it costs a lot. You know, high glue is $1 a pound, and this guy was, I don't know, $200 a pound. Must have been more than that.
Holy moly!
It was
but the tone.
Well, sold by these tiny ounce bottles because it's it's made from the swim bladders of Russian sturgeon. I mean,
oh my God,
rarefied here, folks.
I'm gonna start upcharging neck resets, and I'm gonna just tell them I'm using sturgeon glue. We're on the road to riches here.
Road to crazy.
I just want to. I think next April Fools, I'll put that into the unofficial Martin Guitar Forum with the new thing is sturgeon glue.
Oh.
But
leave me out of that one, okay?
Everybody will be anonymized. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your tang crimper. We brushed on it last week, but it comes up. Oh, go ahead.
You wanted to talk about
your tang crimper, the one that the little one tooth thing.
Sure. That's just a very simple. It's a very simple tool that was one of the first tools I had a friend tell me. He says, "Here's what you need. Go make yourself one." So I did. So
it comes up quite a bit. I mean, we're dealing with guitars now that have seen several refrets. We're dealing with a lot of Martins with sometimes questionable neck reinforcements and stuff, and so compression fretting is kind of a big deal on Martins. Are you using the tang crimper just mostly to get hold, or are you also able to add compression to a neck with
the former?
The former?
Just to keep the goddamn fret stuck in there, and only in the dire circumstances. Really. mean, people say you should never use glue on fingerboards. You know, should never glue the frets in because it'll destroy the life of the poor person who comes after you.
Uh-huh.
And I just can't imagine anything more simply wrong than that. You know,
It
we
does
all heat
seem.
the frets to get them out. So guess what? The glue is not a problem. So I would much rather fill the space with some glue.
Have you had any luck trying to figure out how to reconstitute a fret slot to get more compression out of the neck, or is it just time to replace the board if they get too out
Well,
there?
what I've done, I can't necessarily say I've done it that much to try to get more compression, but what I like is cyanide acrylate. And I have no objection to filling the slot completely and recutting it by hand. It's a pain in the ass, but I've got no objection to it. And it gives you a real solid purchase for the fret coming in. And there's the only real trick I have on that basis is definitely one I know is on the Fret's website, which is to bevel the tang of the fret so it goes in like an arrow rather than like a club.
So put a like an arrow point on the bottom of the tang.
Yeah, starting as close to zero as I can and climbing up the little nibs.
That's cool.
And it's, you know, I'd much rather modify the fret than the fingerboard, for sure.
Yeah.
But then that's really where I have troubles with trying to use the tang expander thing to spring a neck back into shape. Because it's going to require doing them all. That's pretty heavy duty work.
It is, yeah. I find the Sumac kind of pinking shear style tang expander to be not my cup of tea. I'm really interested in the one that you're making, but
well, you know, I gave that little tool to Dan early very early on in our relationship, and I said, here's a tool I make that's really useful, and he liked it, and he showed it to Don McCrosty, who's their chief tool designer, and that he'd been with Sumac since the very beginning, and he ended up coming up with that wavy approach. I'm not saying it's better or worse. It's very different. It doesn't allow the fret to grip quite the same way. It's just if you just want to move individual little barbs over to the side, you can really gain more that way. And people could argue, well, there's less control, but we're sort of out of control at all on everything working on these guitars. So we do what we can do to get by all right.
Yeah.
And as I say, that as I mentioned earlier, that particular tool was one that a friend showed me that he'd made out of a very little mini end nippers, and that's what I've done ever since. And I sold a lot of them through LMI. We got together on that one, and they sold a bunch of them. But they finally gave me the notice they couldn't sell them anymore because they're just too ugly.
They're too ugly?
Mm-hmm. And
oh boy!
Do that. Well, companies' reasons for doing stuff is really hard to sort out sometimes, and I really love those guys a lot. They're just, to me, they're the best. The folks at LMI, but I never caught that one. That just okay. It's uglier, but it's cheap. But they said, no, we'd rather have something more professional looking. I don't know if they've ever actually replaced it with something else. And then, I had my little fret filing jig that they sold a number of. That's the takeoff on that one I saw up at when I was visiting with Dan up at Tacoma Guitar. And they sold a number of them. And they said, well, I hope you don't mind, but we've come up with a different solution to that problem. I said, great, I'm tired of making them. and so they have this thing that Robbie O'Brien designed. It has to be the most clumsy and difficult to put together and use. I suspect it does a great job, but it's not simple and handy, which to me means a lot.
Yeah.
And mostly that's because I'm working on different instruments all the time, rather than just, all Martin guitars or something like that. And then having a fret tang filer to do the ends of the frets made sense to me. That they had the ones that they had because they could just use a regular full size file and zip them off in a hurry. And so LMA came up with this new variant that's vastly more complex and more expensive to make. I asked Natalie up there, I said, well, I'm not complaining here, but why did you do that? And they said, well, it's not going to be easy for the Chinese to knock this one off for cheap. Okay, I guess not.
Well, oh boy.
But I can't say enough good stuff about the nippers that are out there, though, to clip those, because most of the time people do a lot of filing on it. They say they do a lot of filing on it, but I think they don't need to. But it depends on the application, of course.
I haven't used the Summit, but I just got the new Sumac nippers a while back, and just the fact that I still do go back and denib, but just the fact that it's got that depth stop on there, and that's so cool.
It's a dedicated tool. I like it.
Yeah. I hear the Summit one is a little easier on your hands, but
I have to say I wouldn't know, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Some people are talking about Kamamoto in the chat here. It's like, have you done a lot of bar fret refrets in your day?
More than I want to. Not a lot. No, I do them occasionally.
Yeah.
The thing about, how do I say, trying to be a professional in this business and doing bar frets is to find a way to charge more.
Yeah.
It's just, you're talking about rabbit holes.
Yeah.
So that's one where the rabbit invites you in and says, you're living here forever now.
Do you have a good way to get, it seems like all of them had those frets over the body that were like pinged with a chisel blade or something, and they just ripped the board up. Do you have a good way of taking those out?
Heat.
Lots of heat.
And if that's not enough, more heat.
More heat.
And if that's not enough, then I get it a lot hotter. And if that's not enough, I get it really, really hot.
You get it so hot it just oozes out of there.
I get it so hot it burns.
Yeah, that's fair.
And again, I don't know who sent this tip around or showed it off, but this one guy had one of these Weller soldering guns. The kind that has two contacts that come together in a little knob. And all he did was cut them short, and cut V's in them, and put them on the fret. And then the fret becomes the heating element. Yeah. And I'll drag that thing out on rare occasions, but it'll save my butt. Yeah. To get it that hot. And the smoke definitely comes. But otherwise, what is there? There's no way to make the barbs get smaller while they're in the ebony. So we just have to do what we do.
Do you have a sense on why Martin was so hesitant to move away from bar frets so late in the game? Like what is it, 34, or is it the last bar fret, or 30?
The tang fret was around a long time, but the tang fret with the rolled in barbs was actually invented or patented in like 29. Yeah. So by that scale, maybe they're not moving that slowly, but it's why Martin did something or Gibson did something or whatever. It's always a difficult choice, because the one thing you absolutely have in the forefront at any level of their history, both companies are all about units out the door.
Yeah. They were manufacturers.
That's exactly right.
The
So now Martin did it with a string of highly trained craftsmen, and there's a limit to how big a workforce you can have that's like that.
do you think
Not to mention the total amount of experience and training to get a guy from pushing brooms to doing parfaits.
it seems insurmountable to pass that along, especially considering, I mean, you can really move that. My experience was that you could really move a neck around quite a lot with the frets.
With the bar frets, you can really mess it up.
Yeah, you can back bow it like crazy. I wonder, they were, not reinforced necks for a long time. Have you ever seen a 14 fret dreadnought with bar frets? Did one of those ever exist?
Yeah.
Did there?
Yeah, the OMs. Yeah, the Martin OMs were 14 fret. And generally speaking, they hold up just fine.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of interesting stuff about bar frets, and a lot of it is absolute conjecture on my part.
I want to hear some conjecture. Can you share it with us?
Yeah, if you ever work with nickel is a copper alloy, obviously, and if you ever work with that stuff, it work hardens so easily, it's completely ridiculous. As a quick example, early on, a long time ago, I bought myself a set of jewelry rolls, so you could roll wire through it and flatten it. And I figured I'm going to be needing this a lot. Over the years, I've used it so few times just to say, I would have been better off with a sander, but that's okay. But if you run, say, bar fret wire through that, it hardens. And if you run it through a few times, it comes out in little chunks. It just crumbles as it comes out. So you kind of have to anneal it after every turn. When you anneal it, it turns black, and it's soft and bendy. Okay, in the 60s and 70s, we were able to buy bar fret wire from Martin, no problem. They had only a few sizes available, but you just order it and it would come wadded up in an envelope. They would take what looked like an 8-foot piece and roll it up into like a 10-foot circle and squash the circle, and then put it in an envelope. So it's like a flat wad. And you'd say, well, I'm never going to get this stuff straightened out. Then you start bending it, so it straightens out nicely. So I'm going to say that was fresh from being annealed, and it's completely soft compared to what we're used to seeing. Now, I don't know what that means in terms of longevity or performance or how it was handled or is handled by more experienced guys, or possibly just the pounding in of the frets does some self-hardening, and we know that to be the case with some stuff. But if you pull the frets out of those old Martins, the tops are nice and level and got a nice little radius. The bottoms are wavy and not consistent not consistent in depth at all.
Yeah.
I think, okay, what does that mean? To me, that means it was soft. They tapped it in until it stuck, and then they ground the top off. I could be wrong. I just don't know the answer to that.
No, that makes sense. I know exactly what you're talking about. I never thought about it. I had talked to Alex a little while ago about work hardening nickel over fret wire. He thinks there's work hardening to be done after the fret job. Do you do any kind of work hardening to your?
I haven't, but
frets?
I know some guys who say that doing some work hardening really does improve the hardness to the point where it lasts longer than stainless.
Yeah.
I have trouble buying that one, but it may very well increase it quite a bit. And he was using a teaspoon.
A teaspoon, like, and just rubbing it across it. And...
rubbing across real hard, back and forth. That way, it doesn't scar the fingerboard.
Huh.
Yeah.
I think if somebody walked into my shop while I was doing that, they'd wonder what I was doing. What are you doing with that teaspoon? Yeah. Oh, just work hardening the frets.
There's an awful lot of stuff to get to be, how do I say, not just learned, but passed around. Even now, we're not that great at passing all the information around.
No,
the combined knowledge is there, but it's hard to get to.
It's hard to get it out. Some guys are secretive. Some guys just don't. They've forgotten what was important, and it just takes kind of getting them out of them.
Well, yeah.
Do you think? I always suspected bar frets might sound a little bit better as a result of having contact with the bottom of the slot, whereas T frets are kind of usually got a vacancy below the tang and the bottom of the slot. Is it?
But by my most recent description, they don't have a contact at the bottom.
Yeah.
So I would say
probably not.
I would say not, but there's, if you're going to start slicing and dicing, maybe they're a little more massive.
Yeah.
Just the side walls of the fingerboard grip them more tightly. There's everything. All interesting stuff for sure.
Yeah, hard to test.
I certainly know some folks who've had instruments converted to bar frets, they claim, for playability and sound reasons. I really don't quite get it, why somebody would say take a 1928 Gibson L5 and put in a new fingerboard with bar frets, but some guys do.
Yeah, the problem with I find with bar frets is they just aren't wide enough, and they wind up it's hard with the crown on them because you can't be more circular than you are wide, and so they wind up with this kind of like flat spot that comes up, and then a crown, unless you grind them all the way down to where they're just around, and then they're quite short.
You just have to really take the time with them.
Yeah.
That's a notorious pain in the ass.
Are you a 3-corner file guy, or?
Yep.
So
I use two kinds of 3-corner files. The 30-degree one that my dad always described, what did he say? Called it a 3-corner file.
Mm-hmm.
And then I use something that's called a cant saw file. And a cant saw has it's triangular for sure, but it's like 100 degrees and 2 40-degree ones, something like that. And I don't claim anything special about it, but I've just found it happens to be handy for me to use. I've made safe corners on everything. And then if the goal is to not screw up the fingerboard, then I use these, like the Stuart McDonald fret filing guard stuff, or an equivalent thin steel shim stock, and that stuff works really, really well.
Yeah.
I certainly would buy. I'd have a lot more of those Stu Mac ones around if they didn't cost so much. But you can say that about a lot of things.
What would you say, like, on fretting concepts? What is one that came to you kind of later in your career that you wish you would have thought of earlier in your career?
Find a different way to make a living.
Yeah, go back to school, learn how to read a book.
Geez.
But on frets, like, is there anything like, I don't know. Are you, when you do fret jobs, are you constantly stringing it up and de-stringing it and checking
No.
reliefs and playing a little bits off here and there?
To be blunt, I just don't have time for that.
Yeah. I know Alex does that, and I was always like, I wanted to go over and have him explain to me what he's thinking about while he's doing it, because
I mean, this is in terms of controlling neck relief and that kind of thing.
I think so. I talked to Doug also does this, and Alan Watsky does. Another fellow was explaining to me that he likes to have a different relief profile for each string, and I was like, gee willikers, I'm already broke. But
I just I can't argue that it's a good idea or a bad idea, but it's not something that, from a practical standpoint, our work has to be affordable. And even at the high prices, there are people might call us high prices, is even at the high prices we charge, there's ain't nobody getting rich.
It does not seem like it.
No, the whole point.
I just raised my prices, and then I was like, oh, good. I just kept up with inflation. I'm still poor. Yeah,
that's right. And one of our favorite guitar makers had a really very clear experience that way. That was kind of like a real life confirmation, And he was making these wonderful guitars that people liked, and they were buying them, and they weren't particularly cheap. But he said, I want to know, how come I never have any money at the end of the month? I'm always broke. And I remember talking to him about that. I said, well, I'm not in the financial advice business, but the only way I had to deal with it is to find a way to do stuff faster or charge more or whatever. And so he actually hired a full-fledged real financial advisor for his little one-man company. And the guy said, okay, so how much do you charge for each guitar? Okay, and how much are you making each year? That doesn't compute. Okay, so here's the deal. You got to make more guitars. Got to make them faster. And he says, no, I don't. I don't have to do that, because that would compromise the detail work and the quality. And the guy says, okay, then you have another choice. You can raise your price. He says, nobody pay higher than this. He says, okay, there is a third choice. Just give it. Just give it up and go away.
Give up or enjoy being poor.
And finally, he got convinced that what he should do is double his prices immediately. At the moment he did that, the orders went up a lot.
Yeah, it's
and so there's this. Then you get into the perceived value of stuff that can drive everybody crazy too.
Yeah, I'm not good at that. I immediately want to be everybody's buddy, and
well, that's right. And if you're a retail guy like I am, that's the way we live. And I had a big fight with our accountant. Now 20 years ago or more, kind of the same discussion. And he says, just remember, you're not here to make friends. You're here to make money. I said, yeah. Wait a minute. No, I'm not even. I'm serving the community. I'm making people happy. I'm making friends. And he says, no, you're in it for the money. And I said, I'm not in it for the money. I just told you, you're in it for the money. He said, what are you talking about? He says, make it real simple for you. If you don't get the money, you have to quit.
And
Then
then you
where
won't
are you?
be, and then you won't be a service to the community
And you're
anymore.
nothing.
The
So that was,
on the
had some of those eye openers along the way.
It's true, and it's hard. I think that's one of the hard things it was hard for me to come to grips with. Did you try it as only a repair guy, or did you
We
immediately start a retail side of things?
immediately started a retail side.
There's no path
Richard
forward.
and I sat in the living room and tried to discuss the future, and it wasn't easy. He was pretty much sure that he liked building instruments and like that kind of stuff, but he didn't want to open a shop that's open to the public. It's just I don't think I'd like to do that. And I said, well, I spent a number of time managing a bike shop and doing retail. That was my only real work experience. And I said, well, I'm comfortable getting into that kind of thing. And he says, well, I'm not. And so we duked it out for a fair while. Basically it was one of those, if we can come up with a better idea, let's hear it. And we couldn't. So we opened a little shop on the basis that we could rent a little shop for almost nothing. We had had several instruments in order, which is more than we could keep up with. If we finished the instruments, we wouldn't have enough money to stay in business. And so we opened the shop anyway, saying that at least it'll be a place to work. And if people come in, we can do repair work for them. And it didn't take long for the repairs and sales to take over. And so at this point, I couldn't tell you without looking at, a bunch of charts and numbers as to how well we're doing the repairs versus the other stuff. But the reality is our staff level is so small compared to other shops that have, let's say, a reputation for doing good repairs, that we don't really fit the model too well.
Is there somebody else doing repair where you're at? I can't imagine. How would you hang out at a shingle in Frank Ford's jurisdiction?
Easy, people do it.
Do they?
And they can do fine. They're typically not running a store, though.
Yeah.
But that part of it, there's no real difficulty in competing with us because we're not competitors so much as we are friends to all the people that do that. So I can, we have a number of people that we consider to be extremely good at what they do. They work out of their houses. They can offer a better price than we can. We're delighted to send folks to them.
Yeah. Who was your first repair staff? Who was your first hire after you guys got rolling? Second. Who was your second repair guy?
I'm not old enough to remember that.
Okay, that's all right.
It was early days for us, and so we ran without very clear distinctions between our jobs, and we acquired a third partner, the late 70s, early 80s, maybe late 70s or 1980, something like that. And he did some work, and we did some work, and we all did some stuff together, and we were open for the public, but we didn't have in those days, a very clear definition. And right now, sometimes I wonder if we do, because with the small number of people we have, we're all having to pitch in and help other guys doing their job. Yeah.
Do you remember your first neck reset? Mine was a Guild. Ugh. Wide heel.
Do I remember my first neck reset? I'm not fully sure, but in those days, you have to understand that we were doing things differently.
Yeah.
The logic was fairly for a number of steps. One is we start with the understanding that Martin's dovetail joint is too difficult to take apart, so we don't do that. Okay, then well, how do you reset the neck? Well, there were guys who put a wedge-shaped shim into the whole length of the fingerboard.
Yeah.
Which we still see done on classicals like Ramirez guitar. But our pal John Lundberg in Berkeley was resetting necks on Martins really before we started in business, and he used a method that he brought with him from Chicago when he worked and lived there. It's unfortunately gotten the moniker of the California neck reset, which is only because Lundberg was so important in this area. But the logic was, if the neck is too difficult to get out, and if once it's out, you have trouble reestablishing the angle perfectly, why don't we loosen the back and the neck block and then collapse it back in on itself, and we can test the playability right then with strings and everything.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't bend the fingerboard at the body. It's basically what we were saying at the time. We were saying, what we're responding to is a change in the shape of the body. We all knew that. So we're trying to change the shape of the body back the other way in some form. And so to do that, you end up with a 1/16 of an inch of the back kind of hanging over at the neck end of things. And so that means removing binding and refitting it and gluing it all up and that kind of thing. Maybe finish touch up on the binding.
Were people, was anybody doing that technique well, where they were like kind of re-grooming the rabbit to make the binding stay the correct size, or was
I
it?
was just about to get there.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
And our pal John was known to do it on 45s. You can't do it on a D40, but a style 45 Martin without pulling all that crap out, rechanneling it, put it back in piece by piece, and all that stuff. Otherwise, yes, we were recutting it so that it would all fit back where it's supposed to go. And it was 1975 maybe when we had a well-known local guitar came to visit us. Belonged to a guy by the name of Barry Olivier, and he's the guy who started folk festivals in this area, and was the first one to do an actual folk festival in the country. I think the Berkeley Folk Festival, and he must have started that in about 60 or 61. And he owned this 20s vintage Martin 00045 that was stolen from him. And at one point, these stories are going to go on forever. You guys are going to get so bored.
I'm in it to win it, Frank. You keep going.
One of those, his guitar was stolen and not spotted at all until a person brought it into John Lundberg's shop to see about getting it kind of cleaned up and set up and new strings and stuff. And John says, "I know this guitar. Where did you get it?" And he says, "Oh, I live in this kind of mobile home park, and we've been using it as like a $25 chip in our nightly card games. So we just been passing it around in the range of $25 worth. I don't know how everything went down from there. It was rather quickly returned to Barry, who was delighted to get it back, and it needed to have its neck reset. I think John had gained a bit more wisdom in those days and said, "Sorry, but I don't want to do it." you know, give it to these guys to do. And so he sent Barry to us, and I took one look at it and said, I don't want to do this.
Uh huh.
I'm not taking all that pearl out. I'm not taking all that precious little, brittle wood binding, purfling out of there. I just ain't doing it. And so that was the genesis of steaming the neck out for us.
Did you come up with that on your own, or had you heard somebody doing it somewhere or something?
I think I can name 3 or 4 guys who invented it on their own.
So it was a simultaneous
It happens
genesis.
all about the same time, when the necessity or the item presents itself.
Had you been thinking about it up to that point? It's kind of
No,
it just occurred
not
to you
until I had to do it.
until you were faced with the prospect of peeling the binding off of 45, and you're like, there's got to be a better way.
Had to come up with something. And so we, the question then was, we knew that to get the neck out was really messy. So the conventional wisdom at the time was to remove the section of the fingerboard over the body.
Which you don't want to do on a 45
and then that exposes the dovetail joint. You pour water in it, and then you heat up like framing nails red hot and put them in there, and that boils the water in the joint. And that's what guys are doing,
The original heat stick.
And there's any number of stories about the way things used to be done, or some farmer did them a couple of times and all that kind of stuff. So we still see the results of those kicking around. But I was not about to take a 20s vintage Part 45 and get into that deep for if there was any other way out. And so that was pretty much the first time I used a pressure cooker and a hot plate. And the pressure cooker and hot plate were the mainstays of neck resetting pretty much right along until somebody showed me, oh, hey, you can just convert one of these little espresso makers, use the milk steamer part. Oh, cool, man. And then I guess it was, I don't know, a dozen or 15 years ago, I finally decided that, I ought to look and see what else is out there in the way of steam generators, because if there's something better than we have, we should have it. You should get it. And so I started looking online for steam things, and I learned something right away. First off, there are such things as high quality steam generators. Jewelers use them for steam cleaning rings. And what surprised me is that the conventional way to deal with fabrics is use a steam iron. And what I learned was I didn't even know what a steam iron was. Steam iron is an iron that runs 100% on steam. It has a hose that comes to it, and so its only heat source is the steam. So I ended up getting one of those out of Canada. It became our neck steamer, and it's a boiler with an on-off switch and a foot pedal to actuate a valve that lets the steam out. It has pressure control and a gauge on it, and it runs normally at a pressure of about 50 psi. It works so much better than all these other things, because if you look up, steam pressure and temperature, guess what? The temperature is a lot higher at 50 pounds a square inch. It's up around 250. And that means the stuff in the joint gets hot, glue liquefies and everything before it builds up so much moisture that it oozes all around outside and makes a real mess. Yes, it still does that, but we found ways to avoid that as well.
Yeah, you have that. You have a station for popping necks, correct?
Well, it's a movable rig that we throw onto the bench. We have no way that we have shop space for anything like that
Yeah.
to have its own place. But it hangs on the wall. So the steamer's on a shelf and the rig is on a wall. And clamp it up.
Speaking of neck resets, years ago, and maybe this is on frets.net too, but you had made a aluminum fixture for holding the neck for applying the chisel flat, adjusting the neck angle and then applying the chisel flat to that. Do you still use that, or is that?
No, it was a total bit of over design.
It was beautiful. It didn't.
Well, thanks. It does a really perfect job, but it does the same job in a lot more time with a lot more effort than using the sandpaper.
Yeah.
To pull through the joint. If there's a way to make it slicker, I'll try it. So
I just always wondered if
I've got a garage full of dead ends.
I got a brain full of them too.
Yeah, no kidding.
But that one always piqued my curiosity, because some of them, it seems like I get neck resets from time to time that I feel like maybe I'm pulling too much sandpaper. I could get a little rowdy with the chisel first, but if you're not into it, if you made it and you're not into it, then I'm gonna take your word for it. So.
No, I even made a special chisel for it, and I bent a regular chisel and gave it a really sharp cutting angle and all this kind of stuff, and it takes a razor thin bit off, but adjusting it to get that razor thin shim that where you want it to turns out to be just simply more work than it's worth.
Frank,
and the result isn't any better.
This sandpaper is so slick. When I saw the trade secrets that you had sent Dan off to get from Jeff Draggett's shop, I can't even imagine where my career would have been without that little tip. I probably would have given up trying to figure out how to do a chisel neck reset freehand, I would say.
Well, you talk to the Martin guys that do that. I did talk to one just a few years ago, really, who was a young guy working in that area, and his job was doing the final neck angle adjustment, the final fitting of the neck. And I said, "No, do you guys use sandpaper?" He says, "No, I'll chisel."
Yeah.
Everything with a chisel. And I said, "Oh, well, how many do you have to do?" He says, "My quota is 36 a day."
I would imagine you'd get pretty.
And I just say, "Yep." It just reminds you, the guys get really good at what they do.
They get real good. They get real fast too,
really
and they get real focused. Are you every neck reset gets a refret kind of guy, or do you?
If possible.
Yeah.
The results are better that way.
Yeah.
And we like to think of some jobs that we do as being, how do I say, describable as a stock kind of price. In other words, somebody says, "How much to have the neck reset on your guitar?" My guitar. I say, "Well, what I want to say is shop hours times per hour." And you never know what it's going to be. And there aren't people really all that interested in signing blank check, even though in the balance they may get it cheaper, but it's a risk, And so you just that just isn't the way we tend to do things. And so if you hire a contractor to remodel a kitchen, you say, "Well, call me, let me know when it's done, and I'll write you a check for whatever it costs."
Mm-hmm.
And then people say, no. What are you going to charge me? And so with neck resetting, we like to say, okay, neck resetting, start off by defining the problem. We got to change the neck angle. We have to make everything playable when we're finished. And the frets are a little uneven and stuff like that. And we could save a little by, let's say, not doing much of the frets over the body or at the joint of the body. But I got to tell you, the number of times we've completed that job for people and find them come back and say, "Well, gee, it's got this little buzz when I get the action really low," or something like that. We just say, it's better to say the way we define neck resetting includes all these things, including refretting and nut and saddle work, whatever it takes to get it back to what we would consider new guitar playability. And we don't publicize necessarily that if a person comes in and we can pull the neck and put it back in without refretting it, we might actually give them a call and say, this one probably doesn't need the refretting. Can maybe save you a few bucks. But the reality is we find that it's so little savings in time.
Yeah.
Over the chasing your tail of nailing down all the possible uneven frets and things like that.
It also seems like if you go in with like they spent $600 on a neck reset and it isn't meeting expectations afterwards, even if you front load the conversation with, if I don't get to refret this, then it doesn't get to be perfect, you still wind up having these conversations with people about why it isn't perfect at the end of it.
Right. So the point is that, how do I start over?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hijack.
For me anyway, it's I'm starting to lose my train of thought here. The whole kind of cost breakdown and everything is a little hard to figure out, with that stuff, with the little possibles that can crop up.
Right.
What if you have a finish problem, so on.
Can I ask you, so when you're in for it and you're going to do a neck reset and a refret, do you set the neck to the old frets? Do you pull the old frets out after it's off? Do you pull the frets out before you take the neck off and true up the board a little bit before you pull the neck?
No, I wouldn't do anything but I would do the neck reset completely. That is to say, all of the physical stuff of getting the neck in there and have it all glued up solid. And at that point, then take the frets out and refret it. In other words, just like a regular refret job without resetting the neck.
Okay. And do you? Oh no, I lost my train of thought. I had a really good follow-up question.
We'll have a hit on here in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you have like any kind of saddle height that you're shooting for? One of the things I noticed, like one of my real problem things with neck sets is like Gibsons with flat bridges and 12-inch radius fingerboards, and where do you set the neck to? Do you have a good rule of thumb on that?
No, a bad one.
Yeah, you had a bad rule of thumb. You have a bad rule of all thumbs.
Bad rule of thumbs. Well, it's one of those things that we try to take both a common sense and playability perspective along with the historical. And some instruments started out life with rather low saddle heights, and maybe they should always be that way.
Yeah.
So we find ourselves less interested in jacking up the saddle to the highest possible current standards, if you will.
Yeah.
And so we try to achieve the best neck angle we can with the least messing around with the bridge as possible, except in as much as if we're replacing the bridge, that's completely messing around with it. But we'll try to make a bridge that would be appropriate for that instrument, because we see a lot of neck resetting done with the intent of good playability, but in doing so, they'll define it by modern specs and end up with a 1-inch bridge with a very tall saddle that's structurally unstable.
Yeah.
Particularly if you use steel strings,
Yeah, I think thankfully the era of super tall saddles is maybe drawing to a close. I think people are starting to get pretty wise that it's putting a lot of force on it. Also, it seems like maybe your geometry doesn't stay stable over time without much leverage.
Right. And everything's moving all the time, and so That's a tricky bit of business.
Do you think the California neck reset got a badder rap than it deserved? Now that I think
always
about
clear
it,
on that subject. Yes,
yes, I see that
there isn't such a thing around here.
as
We don't call it that.
okay. What is it, like a slip block, or what do you?
Yeah,
what do you
we always call it slipping the block, or a neck reset through the back, or
Yeah.
something like that. But I mean, you're sort of disparaging the state of the art around here by pinning what's universally now considered a bad thing to do
Yeah,
on the geography here.
it is a little hard on California too.
Well, perhaps, a lot of people they're just plain envious of California because, like it or not, we're leading an awful lot of what goes on in this world.
Mm-hmm.
All the stuff they talk about, you crazy liberal Californians. It's not too long before they're thinking in those terms too. Whether it's race and gender equality or whatever you want to get into.
Mm-hmm.
We could play it to politics. I try to avoid that. So in our shop and for me online, I don't have opinions.
Uh-huh.
But
Well, that's okay.
it's just the way it is.
I don't know. I forget where I heard California neck reset, but I'm from Oregon, and we have animosity, cultural animosity towards California, but only.
There's just certain guys that have gotten interesting reputations. One of the ones that was the single most productive repair guy I've ever known, and that's a guy named Mario Martello. And he is single-handedly responsible for the bulk of the repair work that went through 3 of the best service places in Northern California. He just took it on contract, took it home. First in, first out, he fixed stuff. He was kind of known for, that's what you want? I do it, Chief.
Uh-huh.
And he got some, just among our crowd, some things hung on him because he did some odd stuff occasionally. And the reason he did it is typically because it worked.
Yeah.
Is it always appropriate? Was it then? How about if the answer seems that way, And so we had a guy come into the shop whose guitar was in serious need of refretting. The frets are worn down to almost nothing. And he says, I think I need to have the action lowered a little bit. So we started talking to him and said, well, it really needs to have new frets because the frets they don't have a lot left on it. He says, well, listen, I'm 94. It'll last long enough as it is. Said, it makes so much sense. We all just said, good for you, man. You're still playing guitar.
Yeah.
And nobody here wanted to refret after that.
Those things that those oddball things that people would do just to get things running. A lot of people, especially now with the modern prices that they are, I don't hold anybody to some modern standard for what was going on back then either. I mean, a lot of that.
Yeah, judging the past it's a tough
I mean,
thing.
there was a guy, in Nashville that was turning 28s into 45s, and they were nice 30s and 40s, 28s, but I think history's frowned upon that pretty good. But
yeah, it's kind of too bad because it was the only way you could get one. I'll say it.
Yeah.
You want a D45, you converted one.
How had you seen any good conversions, or was anybody like doing? I can't imagine that.
Some of these guys did great work. Some of these guys did great work.
The 45 conversion must have been hours.
Guess what?
What?
It absolutely was. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what these guys were charging, but of course, those were different days economically for so many of us.
Do you have any opinions on retopping Martin archtops? I know that was kind of a craze for a while.
Oh, I don't know. I'm a little bit sad to see it happen, but they're not exactly useful guitars, so
Yeah.
it's fine with me. You know what? I guess there's such a thing as too much reverence for some of this stuff.
Yeah.
It's people that bring in a rare guitar and say, well, they only made 1,000 that year, and I said, well, that isn't rare. That isn't even in the precinct.
Uh-huh.
What if you had the only one? How far would you go?
Uh-huh.
And what's appropriate to do to that? It's a very tricky question.
Yeah, I think it is.
And when it comes to the only one, there's one. I think I did the full rundown on the website for that, but there's that. I put together that 1931 original left-handed, original 7-string triple of 45. And it absolutely is the only one.
How did they do the 7th string? I ran into one at Bruins where they put a banjo tuner right in the middle of the.
It looked like they were evenly spaced.
Yeah.
And there was a hole drilled in the peg head, slotted peg head. So they drilled a hole right through the inlay.
You ever get any of the Martins with the friction tuners? Some of the violin peg ones?
Well, you mean like the old timer?
Yeah.
Sure. The ivory pegs and stuff.
How functioning are those pegs? Are those?
They're terrible if you have nylon strings, and much worse if you use steel.
It's the best just to leave them unstrung, is what you're saying.
No, leave them for what they are. They're wonderful artifacts of the early years, and trying to coax too much modern performance out of them just isn't appropriate. But it's a big sliding scale.
Do you have much love for any of the early pre steel string Martins?
Man. Some of that stuff is just beautifully conceived and designed, and the craftsmanship is absolutely stunning. In a factory that didn't have electricity. Come on, man, that's really something.
It really is.
And no argument there. And even with Gibson in their early kind of duplicating Carver kind of days, some of those super early ones, they're primitive, but they're really wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think maybe the more you get kind of dialed into the historical, the farther back you find yourself slipping to the point where your greatest reverence is for the most primitive and least useful stuff. I think, where am I now? I don't know.
It's pretty nuts, like I'll tell anybody who listens that when you pop a fingerboard on one of those Teens 4-style Gibson mandolins and you look at the mandolin dovetail neck joint, and you just go, how did you guys do this with horse-drawn router bits? I don't know.
That's right.
I don't know how you guys did this. Like, it's flummoxing.
Of course, it was after it was in the 20th century, but yeah, they had very limited stuff, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't really know much about the high-speed tool technology in those days, but you look at one of those joints and you say, this is a machine-made joint, but it's absolutely beautifully done.
It's so tight. I don't like.
Yeah, you never see shims.
I don't know, because that, especially like on an F-style mandolin, like there's not a lot. It would be hard to cut an F-style mandolin neck joint with CNC and have it be that tight. I think with maybe like a extra axis, it would be, where you could get the bit in there or something like that.
You'd have to talk to our friend Mr. Bill Collings about that.
Yeah.
Because I assume he's had it figured out.
Yeah, I haven't taken one of his apart. I haven't seen his neck joint, but I'm sure it's pretty tight.
Yeah, if it's Collings, it's tight.
How How is the world of high-end mandolins? Are people still buying those things hand over fist?
I guess it depends on what you mean by high-end mandolins. If you're talking about the, let's say, modern F5 replicas that are quite nice, I wouldn't say they're buying them that way, but the world is fragmented as it's always been with, the variety of sources for import. And we've got some sort of hybrid sort of manufacturing. Our friends at Northfield, for instance, have a small team in China that does the basic manufacture, and then they'll send the instrument here, and the guys at this end will do some finishing up, and I don't know what operations. They make some here as well, and so they're able to innovate or change models really quickly. So when they get the word everybody wants an octave mandola this month, they'll have them out before too long. I mean, things like that turn up, but it's the super high collectibles have failed to, as we might say, perform as they did for a while, and presents because they had a bubble that we don't know the source of. But some of the early F5s.
I think I was working at Burns when the bubble started. I think I watched it happen. But yeah, George was like, we had gotten some what he called an unsigned lore in, which was like I think a 25 that was mostly Gibson still hadn't destroyed their knowledge of how to manufacture them yet.
Well, yeah, Lloyd was probably still bouncing down the back stairs after having been fired.
But anyway,
he signed the last couple of labels or something.
There hadn't been a lore to be sold for quite some time. The market had kind of dried up on them.
Well, they're around.
Oh yeah, now, but this was back in 2006.
Oh, right, yeah, they just weren't.
And George got this unsigned one, and he was like, he priced it. He just like spitballed. He's like, I don't know, there aren't any going. How about 70? And then as soon as he said 70, like all of the signed lures started coming in. Sure. If you can get 70 for that, then you should be able to get 90 for mine. And oh, you got 90 for that one? How about get 100 for mine? And I was just off to the races.
Yeah, I think the lures got the at the highest might have made it up to about 220.
Yeah, it was something.
That was definitely, I think, out of range. But
it seems like a lot, and I've played some that, I mean, even without the Verzies in them, I've played some that they weren't great. I mean, I've played some that were, of course, stunning, but boy, I'd hate to think of spending $200,000 on one that didn't sound good.
Well, you're not buying an instrument to play any more than the violinist is buying a Strad to play it. They're buying it to have it.
Mm-hmm. Those, like the mandolins are cool, but like every time I've popped a case on one, I find I spend more time looking at the case. I'm just like, this case is cool. This case is so cool.
Al Michael looked up the prices, and he said at the time when the lure was mandolin, it was like $225. The case was $50.
Oh my God!
People were spending a lot of money on those old cases.
Yeah,
they're beautifully done.
They're nuts. Somebody wrote an article in VG about how much more the case in the day, the case manufacturing was so much more expensive than a lot of the instruments. That's why a lot of them came in chipboard stuff with no case.
Yeah.
Hey, does anybody have any questions for Frank? I've hogged him up for. How are you feeling, Frank? We've been going for an hour and 41 minutes. How are you feeling?
Doing okay, man.
All right. Anybody have any questions? Somebody was asking about your thoughts on harmony conversions? And I'm assuming by harmony conversions you mean throwing some X braces in some of these older ladder braces guitars and give them a little bit more modern sound. Are you?
What do I feel about it? We used to do it. Can't afford to anymore.
It seems like a big project,
Right.
especially get the back on without it looking all kind of butchered.
That's always a tricky bit, you know. Lately, in terms of my general thinking of things, I've been more inclined to take tops off than backs because you can do that without being seen. But then you got the other stuff to consider, like the neck and the fingerboard and all that. We're taking necks off more comfortably than we once did. And so we can now kind of choose, do you take the top off or take the back off, or how far do you want to go? And with that 31 0045, my goal was to get it to the point where you could look inside and not have any idea that it had been fixed. And at some point, you have to know what's going on because you get a mirror in there. But if you look without a mirror, it's not possible to tell that the cracks were ever there, or that the back had been removed and put back on. Of course, it hadn't been. But that was a very special circumstance for everything.
I'm a big fan of top off too. Are you doing tops? Because I feel like you got like the avenue to go in through the neck joint area to get the top separated from the neck block, which, you know, I don't know how you do that with the back other than going through the inside. But what's your thought on taking tops rather than backs?
Well, I think that's about it. You know, I think I just said it all.
Okay.
Just that if it's more convenient from the desired outcome, it's worth it. Otherwise, it's all bloody expensive stuff. And so, you know, given the range of instruments we're called on to work on, there's just a ton of stuff they can't afford to do at all. You just have to say, well, we can't afford to fix this one. And, you know, maybe you could send it to blah, blah, blah to work on. And if it's a Martin guitar that has a very damaged top, we'll say, there's only one outfit that could put a new top on a Martin guitar. It's Martin. Send it to them.
Mm-hmm. Do you have when you're going to put the top back on? Do you got any? Are you indexing, or are you just getting stuff lined up and clamping a little bit at a time, or what's your?
Well, unless it's under a tremendous load, I'd say that most of my indexing is done by the number of pieces of kerf lining I've broken. So they sort of go together.
They fit back together nicely.
You know, again with the high glue and fairly quick but careful clamping, you can get it pretty much back on where it went originally. Everybody is aware of the spool clamps, but once I was introduced to those mini quick grips, all of our spool clamps were given away.
Yeah.
Because they're way too much work.
Yeah.
The little mini quick grips, you can work them one-handed and just pile them on. They fit together as nice as you want. You know, they're not terribly expensive. So I think we have like 75 or 80 of them hanging on the wall. And we just go back and grab an armload of them, you know, and do that. But, you know, the reality is that there's all this stuff that's available. We've done a lot of it, but we're a small shop and we try to serve the public that comes in. And so mostly what we're doing is extremely small repairs.
Yeah. People stepping on,
you know, a crack
stepping
in the
on
neck,
cords and pulling.
a dryness crack in the back of a Kamaka uke, for instance.
Who's your Doc wants to know who's really impressing you on guitar construction right now? Like when you see stuff. I mean, besides, you know, Santa Cruz and Collins are pretty well known. Any kind of up and comers that you see where you're like, holy moly,
Well, every so often I see just individuals that pull off something I would never have guessed was possible. There's almost always a secret as to what did you used to do for a living kind of thing. But we occasionally get people who just as hobbyists do the most stunning work. But we're kind of blown away by the stuff coming out of China, I have to tell you.
China's getting scary.
Yeah.
I worry how anybody's going to pay for a refret when they can just buy a brand new guitar that works just
Well,
fine for.
that's exactly right. And it isn't just China.
Yeah.
I mean, Martin finally tooled up, and Taylor has been right along. They can produce huge quantities of guitars. They're very competent instruments.
Do you think it'll ever be like there'll be enough guitars for everybody on the planet? Or will humanity always have this insatiable guitar appetite?
We're probably at about 20 per person, so I don't know where you define that.
Where you'd find a person that doesn't have a guitar. I just wonder, like,
talking about most guitarists have
like,
so many instruments already.
I tell people
we wonder where they're going to put them all.
It's like you go into, like, if you go down to Lark Street right now, there's probably like 100 halfway decent made German violins stacked like cordwood in there.
Yeah.
I just wonder, like, is it going to be like that with guitars? Like, there's just going to be guitars squirting out of everywhere because there's just so many.
Like used instruments?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's happening already.
Yeah.
We have people come in, not to put too fine a point on it. A lot of us are aging out of this deal.
Mm-hmm.
And we have people come in all the time. But yeah, my father's on his last legs, and we can use the money to help pay for his medical care and stuff like that. And he has 45 or 50 guitars. Could somebody come out and take a look at them for us? And, out of those, who knows? Sometimes there'll be this stunning collectible thing. Then again, there may not be nothing of that nature.
Yeah. Guitars as baseball cards is kind of fascinating to me, like how that is kind of maybe the.
Well, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. But that also doesn't leave much room for me earning a living working on them because they'll just be like, in a cellophane wrapper or something. But so anybody want to? Coming up on 2 hours, I feel bad for having you so long, Frank, but the stories are wonderful.
I didn't have anything particular on my plate for today, so it's afternoon, so it's good.
You got anything like I've seen quite a bit like straight up cracked X braces around the bridge plate. Do you have any good solutions for like snap like a twig X braces in critical areas? Do you graft into them or anything, or?
Oh boy, that's a tricky one. Sometimes I'll make a little what I think maybe the carpenters would call a sister, so you go right alongside it if that's the case. In most cases, I'll put structural stability ahead of originality, because whatever it is that I'm working on, I'd like to have it survive. And, a lot of our friends are just really adamant about I don't change anything that's original. I think, well, I don't know how that works in your head, but it doesn't work on mine. We had a good example of a guy who came in with a thing called a August Pullman mandolin banjo, and that was made around the turn of the century. It's a mandola body with a 5-string neck on it, and he wanted to know about getting 2 new tuners on it. Will you put new tuners on it? And it had these really delicate friction pegs on there. And I said, well, it's 100 years old, and yada yada, like you see, it's in such mint condition, it's quite an artifact. And the guy says, why it's in mint condition? I said, well, and just before I said it, he says, because nobody could fucking play it. Couldn't play it, So let's put some new tuners on it. And I have to say that was the right choice.
The originality versus playability thing, it drives me crazy, especially when the flair for originality is at the expense of potential catastrophic failure, like saving bridge plates, for instance, really drives me nuts. And do you have any like things that you don't hear people talking about bridge plates, by the way? Any observations on them that you think are kind of
I've been fairly vocal about it, and I've taken some heat from a couple of guys on it. We had a thing at the Asia convention, maybe around 2000 or something like that, where we're doing a little panel thing. T.J. Thompson was one of the panel guys, and I'm going to throw his name out, but it's only because he's very upfront and very vocal about, I don't change originality at all. If there's any possibility of leaving a bridge plate, I'll leave it that way. And I said, well, I do quite a lot of bridge plate reinforcement. And he says, geez, under what circumstance would you consider that acceptable? And I said, well, I guess you don't work on a lot of old Yamaha 12 strings, do you? And he says, oops, no, I don't. And it's because we're sort of an all-comer shop, and we've been called on to do heavy work on some really cheap instruments, and we'll take them on if the person is, well, if he gets success, he's got a good reason to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we are in an area where the guy with the sloppy jeans and t-shirt standing next to you in line could well be a billionaire. And so it's not a matter of trying to just check the depths of their pockets, but we always just want to hear, just don't think it's a good idea. Well, and the usual deal is then they'll come back with, cost is no object. This is my great uncle's guitar. Cost is no object, whatever it costs to do it. He said, well, if we were willing to take on the restoration, we'd ask you for a $5,000 deposit. Be glad to return what we don't use. And they'll put the instrument on the counter. You know anybody who would use this thing?
Yeah.
Said, well, you can always donate it to Goodwill. I said, okay, that'll work. And so we have some very basic weeding out when we're talking about as to what our combined motives are for all of this stuff. But we've had people come along and say, yeah, my first guitar was a Yamaha FG 180, and I finally found it. Got it on the internet for cheap, and all it needs is neck resetting, refretting, and a new bridge. I'm saying, on one of those, you realize you're going to have like 6 times on the value of this guitar in it. I said, it doesn't matter.
Do you have a good way of taking those bell pin Yamahas apart and getting them back together? Or?
It's called no.
No.
If I can find out if the next dowel down, I just don't need that aggravation.
Yeah.
The early Yamahas are dovetail.
Are they?
And steamable.
Is there a way to determine the ones that are dovetail or not?
Probably, but I don't know it.
Yeah, because those red label ones, I guess, are getting a little
Yeah,
pricey.
might be worth $200 now, where 20 years ago it could be worth $5.
Remember the hometown I grew up in, like if you wanted an acoustic guitar, did those come out of the factory with crazy action? Because it seems like
I don't remember.
every one of them was a cheese cutter from birth, it seemed like.
Well, that was their competition too.
Yeah.
Harmonies and K's. Unlike the onslaught in Detroit, they succeeded in destroying the American manufacturers with that terrible piece of reasoning. Oh, what is it you want? Oh, we'll make some of that for you then. The other guy said, what is it you want? No, be American, buy American. Ours is best.
Frank, somebody in the chat wants to know about on the frets.com page, you have a thing on like the heavily water damaged lacquer where you go and you brush it on with brush on some Cellusolve with the metal acid brush. Are you still? Is that it?
The Cellusolve is still handy stuff.
Yeah.
You have to understand that when you brush the Cellusolve onto lacquer, you're revitalizing the lacquer right down to the base.
Yeah.
And so you have to be ready to add extra or level out what's there. And the Cellusolve doesn't dry overnight. You want to let it go a long time.
Yeah. Do you have if you were doing that, would you be kind of in for an overspray on that, or would you just level out what you remelted there?
Well, I guess I'll put it this way. I don't do a lot of overspray, but when I do, it's the first coat of Cellusolve every time.
Yeah.
Because if you just overspray new lacquer on old, it'll look great, but it doesn't truly adhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't really melt in, and it's separable. And so the next day it comes along, I'll be rubbing it, and there'll be these witness lines where you've separated the two finishes. And think, oh man, all it needed was some Cellusolve before the lacquer went on, because that's the big deal about lacquer is that a coat of lacquer is pretty much contiguous all through its depth, and I don't think you want to lose that when you're doing touch up or overspray. And I don't do a lot of overspray for every reason there is.
Yeah. Somebody also wanted to know about instrument evaluation. So are you, like when an instrument comes into Griffin for you to potentially buy or to consign, are you pretty much handling all the inspection and appraisal kind of situations?
No, I don't do the appraisals. We have my partner Richard does serious appraisals, and by that I mean the less common instruments, the older ones where it really pays to know some history, and that we do on a basis of writing an appraisal that's specifically designed towards insurance justification. And in terms of trade-ins, I will participate if asked.
Okay.
But one of the things you have to remember, at least, and I don't have any trouble remembering myself because I'm stuck in it, and that is that at this point, my participation in the shop is on the order of a few hours a week at best.
Yeah.
I just don't have the energy to do much more than that. And if they sign me off and say, we can do a new heart valve for you, then that may change soon.
Okay.
But as soon as that squishy thing, the medical guy say, 2 weeks and we'll have an answer for you. And that was about Christmas time for me. So I'm still working
a few 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, I've been photographed, tested, echocardiogrammed, and everything in any possible way you can be. And so I hope I'm next in line for a thing called the Apollo trial. and we're working on it's a not fairly, but yeah, not completely, but fairly new collapsible mitral valve that they can deliver the catheter up through the veins and squish it into place.
Wow.
That might work for me.
Awesome.
If they get chicken to do that one with the valve, they're going to slice me open from the side and do it more directly, but I don't have to have my chest cracked open like I did when I had my open heart surgery. And they made it extremely clear, and I don't want to get into this too deep. They made it extremely clear. I'm simply not a candidate to go through that again.
Yeah.
So some of this stuff is more me fantasizing what I would do if I were, rather than the day-to-day stuff.
Well, let's hope you get back to that.
Well, that's the deal.
Is your partner Richard still? Is he still repairing guitars or building guitars, or does he have his hand in any kind of stuff?
He found his calling in a different direction. So he's authored, I don't know, 3 or 4 books on the history of Martin instruments. Some of them working with the Martin people, and some working with another fellow and another publisher, and things like that. And that's been his direction. And he stayed true to his word that he doesn't really like retail that much, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Nobody has a problem with that. So we now have a fellow in the shop who's stepped on is taking a really good handle on our comings and goings of sales and stuff like that. And we got a bunch of us working together, and I like to say we're all facing the same direction. It's a group of guys that I dearly love to work with, and everybody seems to be getting along as well as I've ever seen before. So
cool.
It's something that people always want to know. What are your criteria for hiring somebody? Number one is this a person I can live with? It's a little like asking for a new roommate.
It is.
Is this guy going to be easy to work with, or is he going to be crazy? Whatever it may be, because
I don't think you would have hired me.
A number of volunteers in the shop together. You better have that handled. But some folks don't.
Somebody wanted to know what you think about compensated nuts. I'm guessing this isn't social security issue.
Compensated nuts can work really well.
Uh-huh.
I'm something of a believer of compensating the nut as a unit, moving it, increasing the distance to the first fret. The fact is that the people who play the instruments that I like to work on never get them that close to tune in the first place, which is another way of saying a disproportionate number of banjo players. Oh, I didn't say that. No, but seriously, the group that really does get it closer to perfect in terms of intonation is what I like to call the electric guitar community. And there's been a lot of in-depth work done and talk about compensating bridges, nuts, even having separate electronic tuners that have built-in justification or compensation. That guy, Buzz Feet, has a monster player, not the kind of guy I would ever argue with about anything. But it's just not something I don't personally have that experience. Now, Brian at our shop and Alfred both work mostly on electrics, and they dive right in there and deal with that. But my general experience is a lot of instruments just are in serious trouble when you snap a cable on. And the group that I tend to deal with more would be those guys. But either way, I don't have anything against them. They can be tricky. And if my understanding is correct, getting that far into compensation becomes a real tangle when the goal is to play with the keyboard.
It does seem like if what you're going for is something that pleases your ear and you're getting closer to what I guess just temperament rather than equal temperament, yeah, you're going to be out of tune with the remainder of your band.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I'm more a believer in if it bothers you that much, just make an adjustment in your tuning, move on. But easy for me to say because I don't have to do it.
I found that if I ask customers like that are really on an intonation quest, whether or not last time they tried to tune their guitar, they consumed a lot of marijuana. I find that sorts a lot of things out. Like something about marijuana use is they get hyper fixated on tuning. I don't know what it is.
And
real focused.
And a huge number of people we now know are hearing themselves in recording for the first time.
Yeah.
And that's an eye opener or an ear opener for anybody.
Yeah.
You just say, geez, I thought I was better than that. Well,
no, you weren't.
That's what you are. We had an extremely skillful teacher who worked at our shop he's not an intimidating guy at all. He was just a really good player and a really excellent teacher. And his method of helping people through that kind of stuff was have the okay, student, play me something. And then he would play it back for him. It's just, okay, here's what you think you're playing. Okay, now here's what you're actually playing. And it's like, whoops, I've been had. And if you can stand that, it's incredibly good for you.
Yeah.
And so as a result, when we first had video cameras and stuff available, everybody I knew was starting to videotape themselves. Their little bands, their friendly jams, just themselves, just to say, maybe I can learn to be better because of this. And so I took the same cue from them and from Dan Erlewine. I set up a camera on a tripod and I filmed myself doing explanations and demonstrations of neck resetting and fretwork. And my goal at the time was to produce a tape that could be or a equivalent that could be seen as the entire job from start to finish without any breaks. Because that's the one thing that always used to drive me nuts about watching videos on how to do stuff is they say, okay, here's how we finish off a fret end. Okay, we've done that 20. Now we'll do the next thing. Say, wait a second, I have no idea what you're doing. You showed me how to do one, but when you're going to say you do 20 of them exactly the same way, well, they can see that.
The one that gets me is like this old house. They'll be like installing a window, and they'll always say, and you could run into X, Y, and Z problem sometimes, but look, this one fits perfect. And you're like, can you tell me about the X, Y, and Z? Like that's when I do this, that's exactly what I'm going to experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Doug Proper chimes in and says that just temperament is impossible with frets. So just so you know.
I'm cool on that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dedicate is right. Yeah.
I think people would be interested to find out. Doug, do you find just tempered stuff to be jarring to hear?
Well, not jarring so much that it's incompatible with fretted instruments.
Yeah.
So the guitar is an instrument that lives in the equal temperament world, as does the piano.
Yeah.
Everybody's, in my opinion anyway, everybody's attempt at recompensating a guitar so it doesn't do what a guitar already does is always fraught with peril.
Yeah. I always tell people my favorite albums were made with normal guitars. So, yeah. Frank, Dan Earlywine wants to know if you were to pick, if you were stranded on a desert island with only 2 Hawaiian shirts, which Hawaiian shirts would they be?
Oh, I can tell you instantly.
Yeah.
If you got a second, I'll show you one.
Okay. If you got the energy for
That's just it's not too far away.
it. Okay.
Thanks, Dan. It's gonna take me a minute here, so just
Do your
Like-
thing. Well,
have to
The
bear
one
with
you
me.
have counts.
yeah, you got to jump in here and help.
No, the one I got on, it doesn't count. Problem is I'd bring the camera over if it was movable. Not a good arthritis day, I'm sorry to say.
We got some rain here, and both my wife and mine's arthritis are kicking up.
Oh my gosh.
Dan, how are you doing?
I'm good. It's like going to church.
Did you do any slip block neck sets back in the day?
Yep.
What do you think about them? Are you glad that you're pulling necks, or do you wish we'd all go back to slip block?
Well, nobody could tell you what to do back then, actually, because it was being done different everywhere in the country.
Yeah.
But Herb David, when I worked for him, that's what he had me do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was new enough to it to think, ooh, I don't know, man. It's going to be, how do you make it look good when you're done?
Uh-huh.
And that was the whole problem. I don't think it's a bad thing.
Well, you'd really have to be pretty talented with chisels to make that rabbit for the binding look right afterwards, right?
That's not so bad, but it's the finish.
Oh yeah, the chipped up finish. Yeah. Oh, because you got to heat that. You got to heat it up to separate that neck block, right?
No,
Oh,
no.
and separating a mahogany from a rosewood back.
No, it was always done cold.
Cold?
Yeah.
My experience of trying to separate a rosewood back from a mahogany neck block, it did not go well.
Oh no, it hardly ever does.
Things don't go well.
I might be inclined to saw it. I don't know.
I might try one.
You gonna give it a whirl?
And now I'm thinking. I'm way better at all the things that I need to do to make it look better.
Yeah, that's true.
Not perfect. But making it look good from the inside through the sound hole, that's messy.
That does seem challenging. Doug, were you around when that was going on? Did you ever do a couple that technique?
Yeah, and I regret every one of them.
Uh-huh. It sounds like
we also used to take the fretboard off and cut it at the body joint until my younger brother Stephen, who also used to work at Herb David's, and he's a woodworker, he came in one day and watched me do that and said, well, wait a minute, why don't you cut it out here on the fretboard, a couple frets away, so then you still have a glue joint.
Uh-huh.
And he was right.
Plus you're not in danger of marring the top when you're cutting it off too.
So if I have to do that, that's what I would do. I'd go out a couple of frets down the neck. And certainly have. And since I met Ian Dadlin in this Patreon group, I'm even better. And I can really get good at using that little airbrush.
Squirt. The
fine colors.
yeah.
I'm serious.
Thank you, Dan. Have either one of you guys heard about Matt Humanoff, like heat setting
Yep,
neck joints?
I have.
What do you think?
I talked to Tom Crandall about it.
What does he think about it?
It works.
Does it?
I think so. You should talk to him.
Okay.
Because he worked there and had to do it, but I don't think he had a bad thing to say about it.
Yeah.
I think Matt had him doing it.
Were they putting like something like the heat stick down the neck joint or something? No, they were just like forcing the neck back and then what, like putting steam into the sound hole?
I think warming it all up a lot. Maybe they drilled a hole and put some steam down into the joint, but it wasn't.
All right.
Okay, here we go. Can you
Oh boy,
enough light on it.
look at this?
I know it.
It's got peppers, right?
Peppers? Yeah.
And it's got
God.
big fat guitar.
Uh-huh.
Backside, same deal.
Uh-huh. Is this a modern shirt or is this a vintage shirt?
Well, it's actually both. This is the first shirt that I've ever, where I've ever actually stopped somebody who was walking by and asked him, "Where did you get that shirt?"
Uh-huh.
And he says, "Oh, I bought it at the New Orleans Jazz Festival. Long time ago."
Yeah.
And I can say this might have been around, I think it was at an Asia thing, I should saw him.
Uh-huh.
It might have been around 2000 or something. And so I went home armed with that and a bit of knowledge and put a permanent watch list thing on eBay and waited for one to turn up. And it turns out they do occasionally. And it was a shirt that was, really hit me. And so since then I've had an opportunity to buy 2 or 3 of them. They're all identical.
What size?
Excuse me?
What size are they?
I don't know. They come in different sizes. This one's I think I've got a large and a medium. And I was at one point I was able to kind of switch them around. I've still got 20 pounds of water to get out of me somehow. And diuretics they're telling me to use aren't working, so got to deal with that somehow. But anyhow, that was the first one I ever saw that actually stopped a guy and asked him where he got it. And I've discovered that you can actually buy that shirt new now.
Cool.
Send me a link, Frank.
I'll tell her. No, I shouldn't tell everybody where to find them.
Well, you can tell Dan. I don't think you'll.
I want to twin you.
We'll fix
Frank,
it.
you got any love for the coned instruments at all? Do you like the Nationals and?
Oh, come on! How could you not like a tin can like that?
Uh-huh.
They're wonderful. Do I like working on them? They're terrible.
They're pretty terrible. I don't.
It's okay though. It's a mechanical thing. They can come apart and go together. It's difficult to work on them inexpensively because you just have so much disassembly and reassembly to do.
You pull the.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to ask you if you pulled the dowel sticks on them when you did neck resets on them.
No, I just changed the end of the stick.
Yeah.
And tipped them back. I don't do a lot of neck resetting on those things, but mostly it's the cost. And some of those things are sort of cheaply made, but generally speaking, I think they're quite wonderful instruments.
What percentage of your work was banjo? Is banjo stuff?
I'm sorry,
What percentage of your? I mean, everybody knows you fixing guitars, but you do a fair amount of work on banjos too, right?
I'm the guy that they send to do the banjos. Yeah,
What's that world like?
The banjo that comes in, everybody runs for cover and they say, yeah, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And so we'll talk about it. But banjos, they're like any other instruments. They all have their own interests and abilities and chronic difficulties and all that stuff. So,
would you say that banjo owners are a more difficult customer than a guitar owner, or maybe a cheaper, more frugal?
Oh boy, no, I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
But the thing about banjo owners is it's a really big group, because it's, for instance, talking about guitar players without even mentioning electric guitars. You'd be cutting off a huge part of the world of guitars. The same thing goes with the banjo because it's kind of fragmented. There's the bluegrass community, and they're as easily identifiable as any music community could be because their music is it's unique. I think bluegrass, for instance, is the only music I've heard of where there's some guy running around saying that he invented it. Yeah. And everybody in the world says, yeah, you did. Thanks for doing it.
Yeah.
And everybody else wants to claim R&B, rock and roll, jazz, or whatever. But the bluegrass, that's an unusual situation. The style of playing is so codified at this point, and our expectations of, say, what does a good banjo sound like or look like are pretty much set in stone at this point. And so the closer it comes to the desired master tone, the better it is. I think the same with open back style banjo players and the tenor banjo players. The Irish musicians that like banjos for their ensemble work. And so it's a pretty disparate community.
Are you saying there's a lot more acceptance of different kinds of instruments in open back and tenor, whereas the bluegrassers, they pretty much just want a flathead master tone? Is that?
Well, yeah, exactly. Pretty much that's the deal. Yeah, and the needs and styles and requirements are different. What constitutes appropriate action? For instance, even with a steel string banjo, an old timer might want to have really high action. You don't run into bluegrass guys who can play with action that high, just because of the sophistication of hitting the strings and fretting and all that kind of thing.
I worked with when I was at Grins. I worked with Charlie Cushman, who was pretty good Earl Scruggs impersonator when it came right down to it, and his banjos had unbelievably high action. And he's like, that's the only way you can get the sound. I was like, all right.
That is the deal. Yeah. The best guitar player I deal with is one of those. He plays the L5. And his action he measures his action in an unusual way. For some reason, he measured it from the fingerboard to the top of the low E string. His desired action is 5/16.
5, 6. That's a lot of 16ths when it comes right down to it.
That's a huge amount of territory. But that's discounting the fret and the string.
Well, if he's got maybe a 40 thousandths high fret, let's be generous, it's still a tremendous amount of action.
Oh yeah, his action is so high that you just say, well, why would you do that? His neck, he plays an L5 that's, I think, 50s. And it's been through a lot of hard times. His neck came loose. And the action went way up.
That neck came loose from having like crazy torque on it, from having that action up there. Is he trying to avoid?
It was a travel accident, I think.
Oh, okay.
But the fact is, it went really high, and he didn't notice it. I pointed out to him, hey, your neck is loose. He said, oh, really? I said, that would explain the high action. He says, oh, I hadn't noticed that.
Is he trying to avoid fret buzz, or is he just trying to get his bridge up there high enough to really drive that top crazy?
It's neither one.
Either one?
He just wants to get this great range of expression.
Huh.
I remember seeing a video that he did, sort of a preamble to one of his instructional videos. And he says, well, I just play my guitar and I try to make it sound as much as possible like the Duke Ellington Orchestra,
Yeah.
like all of them. And,
That's,
and he's one of those guys that I found myself arguing with a couple of times. And he shut me down so seriously, I'll just never open my mouth again. You know?
sometimes that's you just figure out that through life that some arguments are not worth having.
Well, you see that, or you get proven wrong.
Yeah.
Like, he just said, check this out. So I said, because he came in with frets were about a little bit of wear, and I said, geez, Tuck, you got nothing to worry about. Your frets are in great shape. They aren't even more than 10% worn. He says, well, I can feel the difference. I said, you can? And he says, yeah, and so can you. And I said, really? So he hands me his other guitar, and I could feel the difference. And I said, okay, zip that one up.
You gotta be careful with those artists. The artists will, like, because I do. Like, I have a friend who claims he can tell differences in things, and I'll be like, no, you can't. And he'll show me.
But in this case, he just hands it me. I could absolutely feel the difference.
Yeah.
I think, shit, I'm no kind of player. But
did you ever get into electric guitars at all, or were you pretty much all acoustic?
Not very
all the
much.
time?
This same guy wanted me to refret his L5, leaving the little nubs on the binding.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a policy of not doing that. It just seems like a total waste of time. So I said, yeah, sorry, we just don't do that. He says, oh, gee, I need it to have refretted. And I like to have the nubs there. And I said, what possible use could they be? And he says, well, let me show you. And he starts playing this really complex fingerstyle piece in which he, at one of the high passages, he takes his little finger over, drags the first string into the little crack between the binding and the fret. It gives out this ding right in the middle of the music. Like, okay, you do need that little ding there. Whatever.
These guys,
And,
they'll find those things.
well, it's just, when you deal with people that are literally that talented, in his case, that hardworking.
Yeah.
You can see where it all comes from.
Yeah.
Because we're old enough to have been around some folks and to see them grow as musicians. Some from kids, some from adults, and stuff like that. It's really exciting to be around some folks like that who just take everything to a new level.
Yeah.
Say,
Well,
I hope you remember me when you're a big guy.
You were right down in you're in the Bay Area, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff going on around there.
Well, yeah. Not we got no performance to speak of, no recording venues, and no airport. But other than that, we've got everything.
Yeah, airports are overrated. I
Well,
find.
it's people we know that are near the airport see the big name guys.
Yeah. Well, Frank, I've had you for 2.5 hours here, man. I should probably let you.
I'll send you a bill.
What's that? They'll send me a bill. I like the sound
Time
of that.
materials, yeah.
I like the sound of that. I should probably.
No,
do
I
something
just feel like
for
I'm
you.
hogging the deal here. So
No, the deal was especially designed to be hogged by you, so
okay,
we're all good.
I'm always happy to
But
have you mouth off because people still come into the shop and say, "Hey, I want to talk to the guy that's got all those opinions." Okay, I got opinions.
well, I think we'll probably have to do another one of these. I'll get with you afterwards, and we'll talk about that. Maybe do another one if you'd be willing.
Well, I don't want to damage it, but otherwise, I'm ready.
Do you have a
Drop
Do you
of a
have
hat.
a Do you have a third hat?
Oh,
you have a third hat? Is there a third hat if we do a
Oh,
third
well,
one?
I can keep you surprised with hats if you want.
Okay, that sounds good. Hey, can everybody unmute and say thanks to Frank for spending time with us? And
Okay.
Thanks, Frank.
thanks, Frank.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Frank.
Good
Hey,
night.
everybody,
Nap
everybody,
time.
Thank you so much.
Reds.com.
everybody, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I'll see
You
Luther's,
guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Luther's on Monday.
All
Come
right.
back right away.